Hello, welcome to 40 Days to PMP and CAPM Exam Success. This is day 1 in a 40-day journey. I am so delighted that you are able to join me. You are about to undertake one of the most important steps in your project management career. You've probably realized that your PMP or CAPM exam certification is at risk. Now, the moment I said at risk, tell me what came into your mind. What do you think I was talking about? Well, if you thought I was referring to something catastrophic, you're actually wrong. Do you know what I was thinking about? I was actually thinking about you acing the exam so bad that the exam wouldn't know what hit it. That's what I meant by risk. You see, risks could be positive or negative. So when you hear the term risk, don't think about the negative first. Think about the opportunities for a change. How about you doing so well on the exam that the PMI couldn't believe what you did because you did so well? That's the approach you need to have to risk management. Positive first, and then the things that could go wrong, because there does need to be a balance. And on your exam, PMP or CAPM, you could very well be tested on your knowledge of these things. So today we're going to talk about risk management. We're going to break this down into easy chunks each day so that you've got enough to work with for the day, and when you come back the next day I'll give you some more information to work on. So what is a risk? A risk is really just the element of uncertainty on a project, be it positive uncertainty or negative uncertainty. A risk can affect a project in a good way or a bad way. When we talk about factors that could influence risks, what comes to your mind? We talk about the probability that the risk could occur. We talk about the impact. So if there's a 20% possibility of a risk occurring, we're talking about a 0.2 probability. If we talk about an impact on a scale of 0 to 100, and I say 50, immediately you can calculate the risk score, can't you? Because your risk score is your probability times that rating on the impact scale. Other things that could affect risks when we talk about risks happening on a project: the timing of the risk. If a risk happens tomorrow on the project, that could be, in my mind, more important or more severe than a risk that we have the next 100 days to prepare for. Another thing to think about is the frequency of that particular risk. If a risk keeps showing up over and over and over again, that's a problem. But that does happen on projects. Things go wrong repeatedly. But you, the project manager, you have a job to put things right. That's what you're going to be tested on the exam. Do I know how to put things right? Talking about another important definition, risk tolerance or stakeholder accepted tolerance levels or acceptable tolerance level. What that means is the amount of risk that the stakeholder is willing to take on. There are other definitions we need to talk about. Risk averse. If I say a stakeholder is risk averse, that just means the stakeholder is unwilling to take risks. Think about it. How many stakeholders have you had that the moment a tiny little thing goes wrong on the project, they are almost pulling their hair out and yours as well? So we do need to gauge what our stakeholder acceptable tolerance levels are on any project. Now, before you dive into plan risk management, which is the first process, you need to be armed with several inputs. So for your homework tonight, I would like you to go through the inputs to risk management, because in every knowledge area, the first thing we do is plan. So think about all the inputs that you need to plan risk management. Think about that. There are lots of areas that risks could be hiding. You'd agree, wouldn't you? So many areas that risks could be hiding on the project. Now, I know I'm giving this to you as homework, but I'm going to give you a little inkling into some of the things you need to have mastered by tomorrow. Okay? So, here's your sneak preview. The inputs to plan risk management. Now, I'm going to give you a very easy way of remembering these inputs. Don't start off by trying to bite off a huge chunk. Just take it one little bit at a time. Think about the triple constraint: time, cost, and scope. Those three elements are so important on any project. Now throw in another important factor. How much time does the project manager spend communicating on a project? Over 90% of the time, or round about that. Of course, communications are going to be a risk to be addressed, and of course communications will be the glue that binds the team together as far as talking about risks. So right off the bat, you have 4 key inputs that you don't even need to cram. You only need to remember the triple constraint and the largest piece of what the project manager does on a daily basis are inputs to plan risk management. So we talked about time, cost, and scope. Talking about time, the schedule management plan right here. Your schedule management plan is an input. What does your schedule management plan have? Your schedule management plan contains information about how schedule contingencies will be reported and assessed. Now you know what a contingency is. It's a buffer in the schedule. But your schedule management plan has that information. How to manage schedule risks. How to ensure that there's enough buffer in the schedule. So in other words, all these different plans kind of work together to give you information for your risk management plan. So talking about contingencies for time, it's talked about in the schedule management plan. Now I hope you remember where the schedule management plan was created. It was created as part of the develop project management plan process. I hope you remembered that. Your schedule management plan was not created in time management. Alright? Your cost management plan, same thing. It was not created in the cost management knowledge area. The cost management plan precedes the cost knowledge area. It was also created in the develop project management plan process. Again, your cost management plan contains information about how risk budgets, contingencies, and management reserves will be reported on the project. So when you think about management reserves, you think about unknowns. Management reserves are for unknowns. We call them unknown unknowns, things that you had absolutely no idea could occur on the project. If it does and it's negative, well, you've got management reserves hopefully for that. Now, if something that you are expecting to happen happens, but you've put aside a contingency reserve for it, then use the contingency. The project manager has the authority most of the time to use the contingency reserve. It's the management reserve that you need to get permission for. Then your project scope statement. Do you remember constraints and assumptions? Yes. Also, the range of possibilities on the project, the scope of the project. That will give you an inkling as to what to plan for on the project. Now, if I gave you a statement, a scope statement, that said we're working on a 2-hour project and all we're going to be doing is digging up dirt. Digging up dirt and putting it in a pile. How foolish it would be to have a $10 million risk management strategy for a scope of work that is so simplistic as that. And that's why we need to look at our project scope statement to make sure that we are tailoring our approach to the project. Okay? So we've talked about the triple constraint, time, cost, and scope, even though it's the schedule management plan, cost management plan, and project scope statement. I like to think of those as the triple constraint. And then I throw in communications. Your communications management plan defines the different interactions on the project and what else. It also talks about who will be available to talk about risks, to share risk information, right? At different times and locations, as the PMBOK guide puts it. So those are your 4 inputs. What else? You've got your enterprise environmental factors and your organizational process assets. Now, of course, these are all EEFs and OPAs that surround this particular topic, risk management. So your OPAs, organizational process assets, could be templates and tools and things in the organization like risk categories already defined from previous projects that you could use on a current project, roles and responsibilities, and those kinds of things. Now, your enterprise environmental factors are really factors that could influence risk management. Risk attitudes is a big one in the organization. Maybe people just don't care that much about risks. That is a factor, and it could harm the project. Does need to be addressed. Also, stakeholder accepted tolerance levels in the organization could also dictate how much risk the project team will take on. So do note these inputs. The inputs, very important. Of course, it's a no-brainer. We get our risk management plan from this, isn't it? And then talking about how we actually put the plan together, we meet. We have meetings, planning meetings and analysis. And that is how we put the big plan together for risk management. But let's talk about what is in the risk management plan before we call it a day. In the risk management plan, we talk about the methodology. How are we going to do this? We talk about the roles and responsibilities. Who is going to do what as far as managing the risks, as far as leading the team, supporting the team, who are the members that need to take part in this. Now, in some organizations, it's just a project manager that does everything. But in other organizations, you have a risk manager, a dedicated risk manager, and so many other people. So when you read risk management, don't think about it the way you practice it in your organization. Think about it on a much larger, broader scale. Think about risk management on steroids. There are people who do nothing but risk management on a daily basis. Alright? Also in the risk management plan, we have information regarding the budgeting, budget assigned for risk management activities, right? The funds that are needed for risk management activities. Also, we have information regarding risk categories. But if in your organization you have an approach to categorizing risks, that information should also be in the risk management plan. You could have a risk breakdown structure. Now, if you have not looked at a risk breakdown structure, please open up the PMBOK guide on page 280 and take a look at it. You absolutely need to get all of this information into your subconscious mind and into your conscious mind, so that on the exam, when you're asked things that you have read but may not have paid particular detailed attention to, you will at least have a good inkling as to what the answer could be. So read the PMBOK guide. I can't say it enough. Read it, look at it, stare at it, take it about the place, and put in that time. Okay? Now finally, definitions of risk, probability, and impact. Different organizations have different approaches to looking at risks. To one organization, if a risk causes a budget or a cost increase of 10%, it could be a huge deal. That could be a high risk. In other organizations, it could be, oh well, that's business as usual. But these things need to be defined, and that is why on page 281 in the PMBOK guide you have the defined conditions for impact scales. Please read it. Absolutely important. You also have information in the risk management plan about the probability and impact matrix, stakeholder accepted tolerance levels, reporting formats for risks, and tracking information. And that concludes our study of plan risk management. Tomorrow we will go into the next process. Now, as the days go on, we will address some processes over a period of days. We may address several processes in one day, depending on the process. But for today, your homework is to go back and understand and retain all of the inputs to plan risk management. And also, I would like you to know the tool and the output, because we've only got one tool and technique and one output. The output is a no-brainer. The technique, I'm sure it will come to you naturally. Have a great day and see you tomorrow. Stay mysticated.